Buenos días. Buenos días a todos. Gracias, Ángel, por la organización de esta jornada. Tengo que decir que no reconozco a nadie con las maravillosas luces que nos acechan, pero bueno, sé que están ahí. Como decía Ángel anteriormente, en el Círculo de la Sanidad llevamos ya 24 años intentando poner encima de la mesa ideas, modelos de gestión que puedan mejorar la sostenibilidad del sistema del modelo sanitario que tenemos en España. Fantástico, fantástico, todos lo sabemos. Pero no está resultando un camino fácil. Yo cuento con la ventaja de que llevo más de 20 años trabajando en el mercado internacional y trabajando con más de 40 modelos sanitarios. Y bueno, quizá tenga una visión privilegiada de lo que aquí funciona muy bien, que son muchas cosas, y qué otros aspectos podrían ser mejorables. Y bueno, uno de los aspectos, una de las banderas principales que hemos intentado izar desde hace 24 años en el Círculo de la Sanidad es una colaboración público-privada mucho más eficiente, mucho más amplia. Desde la industria pensamos que tenemos muchas cosas que ofrecer. Y no solamente lo decimos, lo estamos haciendo en otros países. La mesa que yo he preparado hoy y que ahora comentaré de qué va, aunque lo menos importante es de qué va la mesa, lo importante es el contenido de fondo que tiene. Vamos a poner el ejemplo del servicio que nosotros conocemos, pero en el fondo podríamos poner el ejemplo de cualquier otro servicio. Como decía Ángel, cualquier cosa que intentamos cambiar, tenemos un modelo sanitario fantástico, tenemos unos profesionales magníficos, unos gestores increíbles, pero tenemos una sanidad muy encorsetada. Es muy difícil mover nada y avanzar. A fuerza de ser honestos, esos retos también los tienen en Reino Unido, los tienen en Italia, pero encuentran la manera de seguir progresando. El tema de la colaboración público-privada, ellos han tenido que afrontar desafíos y caminos con muchas penurias, como lo hemos hecho nosotros, pero como digo, siguen avanzando. Al final aparece la palabra maldita, al final se está privatizando la sanidad y ahí ya todo son sospechas y todo se paraliza. En lugar de pensar en las ventajas que tiene en la seguridad del paciente, en los resultados de salud, en que tomando determinadas decisiones se puede hacer un modelo sanitario mucho más sostenible, tener un acceso más rápido a la innovación, optimizar costes. Es muy difícil plantear proyectos de la envergadura de los que, por ejemplo, nosotros vamos a tratar en la mesa de hoy. La mesa de hoy, como tenemos hora y cuarto, no tenemos demasiado tiempo. Tenemos representación de Reino Unido. Enseguida presentaré a los ponentes. Y representación de Italia. Creo que para mí Reino Unido es el mercado referente en la contratación de servicios, es mi preferido de alguna manera, pero también Italia. Italia también está haciendo pasos muy importantes hacia la contratación de servicios cada vez más. Y nosotros, el ejemplo que vamos a poner, o la mesa que vamos a preparar, tiene que ver con lo que es el servicio que nosotros vamos a tratar, que para nada lo importante aquí es, no vamos a entrar en temas operativos ni en temas técnicos. El servicio que nosotros estamos dando en estos dos países, en muchos otros, es el reprocesamiento de material médico-quirúrgico, el reprocesamiento de instrumental, medical devices, endoscopia cada vez más. Y para que se hagan una idea de la magnitud de ese servicio y a qué nivel está implantado tanto en Italia como en Reino Unido, que son los dos países que forman parte hoy de la mesa, nosotros entre esos dos países, y no somos el único operador, aunque sí el más grande, nosotros reprocesamos en el conjunto de Reino Unido e Italia el conjunto de todo el instrumental quirúrgico que necesita la sanidad española en un año. En España, y no sé si está por ahí mi querido Antonio Burgueño, que es la base de datos oficial del Círculo y el que sabe todo, creo que en España se han hecho, con el COVID ha podido cambiar un poco la cifra, pero creo que estamos en torno a 3.300.000 cirugías anuales en lo que es la sanidad pública y la sanidad concertada. Creo que el conjunto de la privada hace como 1.600.000 cirugías. Bueno, nosotros hacemos 3,5 millones de cirugías entre Reino Unido e Italia. Y lo hacemos, voy a poner un ejemplo de lo que es, por ejemplo, la Comunidad de Madrid. La Comunidad de Madrid tiene 38 hospitales que son dependientes del SERMAS, 35 más Canto Blanco, Carlos III y Virgen de la Torre, 38 hospitales. Imaginemos, por ejemplo, y este es el servicio que nosotros estamos desarrollando, imaginemos que en la Comunidad de Madrid hubiese 3 macrocentros externos donde se reprocesase todo el instrumental quirúrgico que necesitan esos 38 hospitales. Todo el instrumental, toda la endoscopia. El operador, nosotros en este caso, lo que hacemos es aportar, en muchos casos el instrumental, obviamente el servicio. Son macroinstalaciones externas. Se me ocurre, así de entrada, pensar en que se podrían liberar como 35 o 40.000 metros cuadrados de espacio asistencial. Se me ocurre también pensar que podríamos estar hablando de un 35 o un 40% de ahorro de costes. Y por otra parte, teniendo en cuenta la entrada en vigor de la MDR, teniendo en cuenta en vigor cómo está avanzando la inteligencia artificial, la robotización, la automatización de procesos, es muy difícil que la Comunidad de Madrid pudiera tener 38 centrales top de la gama para poder hacer el reprocesamiento de material quirúrgico. Por lo tanto, parece lógico, como ha hecho Reino Unido, como está haciendo Italia, que se pudieran pensar en centros externos que diesen ese servicio en muchísimas mejores condiciones, tanto operativas como económicas. Lo importante, no es el servicio, lo importante es que hablemos aquí hoy, y es lo que vamos a hacer, de qué tipo de contratos se están aplicando tanto en Reino Unido como en Italia, qué tiempo de contratación se establece, cómo se seleccionan los proveedores, qué importancia se le da a la cualificación, qué importancia tiene la solvencia, qué penalizaciones se aplican. Todo esto hay que ponerlo encima de la mesa. Yo tengo la sensación, mi experiencia propia, que en este país, si queremos verdaderamente que la colaboración público-privada se valore y se fomente, tenemos que demostrar que en esa contratación público-privada se aporta valor a la salud, se aportan ventajas al modelo sanitario. Creo que es un país donde es fácil participar en concursos de servicios. No hay unas exigencias brutales. Las penalizaciones en muchos casos son de risa. Habría que ver las penalizaciones que imponen, por ejemplo, en Reino Unido. Todo esto hay que ponerlo encima de la mesa porque es lo importante y lo troncal de esta conversación. Por tanto, para poder hablar de todo esto, de este tipo de contratación y cómo es la colaboración público-privada, voy a presentar a los ponentes que me acompañan hoy por orden de intervención. A mi izquierda tengo al señor Richard Phillips, es el director de estrategia del ABHI del Reino Unido. Es la asociación de todas las empresas británicas del sector sanitario. Es su director de estrategia. Es también miembro del Consejo de Administración de uno de los hospitales más importantes de Inglaterra, que es el Royal Orthopaedic Hospital de Birmingham. Y bueno, es máster en Economía, en Investigación y en Management por parte de la Universidad de Kiel. Clara, a mi izquierda también, es la directora de compras y logística del Royal Berkshire NHS Foundation Trust, pero sobre todo es la directora adjunta, la Deputy Chief Officer de la Healthcare Supply Association, es del NHS. A mi derecha, Trevor es el chairman del Institute of Decontamination Science. Probablemente sea la sociedad de control de infecciones más potente que existe en Europa. Por supuesto, mi favorita. Él ha trabajado 37 años en el National Health Service, que se dice pronto. Ha sido uno de los pioneros en trabajar en la transferencia de contratos de servicios a organizaciones externas en lo que tiene que ver con servicios de descontaminación. Él ha trabajado fundamentalmente a raíz del tema de las vacas locas y de la Creutzfeldt-Jakob, donde el Reino Unido realmente explotó en este tipo de subcontratación de servicios. Es pionero también en dar la importancia que merece al reprocesamiento de endoscopia y lo ha puesto todo esto bajo el paraguas también de los servicios de descontaminación. Es un consultor de prestigio internacional y ha sido uno de los miembros que han auditado todas las centrales de reprocesamiento del Reino Unido. Y a mi derecha, Giorgio Ramponi, quería tener una idea también de otro mercado distinto, Italia. En Italia ya hay más de 100 hospitales que están apostando por este tipo de servicios, por esta subcontratación de servicios. En Italia, por ejemplo, el 70% de la baremación en la contratación es calidad del servicio y el 30% es precio. Y Giorgio es el encargado de la expansión de negocio a nivel internacional. Por lo tanto, sin más dilación, vamos a empezar un poco a escuchar a los ponentes y a las cosas tan interesantes que nos tienen que decir. Y el primero de ellos es Richard Phillips. Richard, welcome on board. Your turn.
Paco, thank you very much, and thank you to the organisers for their invitation to be here. It really is a very great pleasure to be in this wonderful city and your fantastic country as well. It's a great pleasure always to visit Spain. I have to say it's a little bit harder to get into your country now for us Brits than it used to be, but maybe we can work on that in the future generations, hopefully. So this will advance, yeah. So let me just give you a sense of what I'm going to talk about. I'm just going to say a little bit about my organisation, so you get a sense of where I'm coming from and my perspective. Let's just talk about collaboration. So I just want to remind us all of the heritage of our industry, of our sector, in collaboration with health systems and healthcare professionals. That is what we're all about. That's where we come from. That's what we still do today. That's what we'll do in the future. And then I'm going to give you a very high-level view of collaboration between industry and health systems, but also government and the approach our government takes to it. And I'll try and go on and explain why I think that's important. So we're the Association of British Health Tech Industries. So we're the industry association that represents the people that manufacture and supply health technologies, products and services in the United Kingdom. We define health tech as medical devices, diagnostics right across the board, from in vitro diagnostics to imaging. So I see Siemens are one of the sponsors to this, and also digital health technologies. And we know digital health, and I think we've mentioned already AI, and that is a real kind of one of the things that's going to make healthcare systems sustainable all over the world. And your opening remarks are interesting. All healthcare systems in the developed world are facing the same problems for the same reasons. There's the demographic challenges, and the fact that we designed our healthcare systems to look after people or fix people who had short periods of discrete illness, but now we're faced with populations that we have to manage with multiple conditions for many, many years, many decades. And our priorities, we have two priorities. One is regulation. That's what we were set up to do as an organisation. I don't want to get us down the rabbit hole that is regulation at the moment and how things are going in Europe particularly, but I will refer to that and actually why collaboration is important. But also growth, and growth of our industry, sure, growth of our companies, then we shouldn't be embarrassed about that as an industry association. That's what we do. But it's also growth in the capacity of the health systems that we serve. And if we're going to address those challenges that exist all over the world, we're going to need technology. We're going to need technology that's going to allow us to deliver care more efficiently, more effectively, more cost effectively, and also allow us to deliver care in different settings. We have a long-term plan for the NHS in England, and it runs to many, many pages, but the long-term plan is all about keeping people who do not need to be there away from our hospital estate. And we learned some of the lessons in that in COVID and the way we delivered care in different settings. I have to say, I think we've forgotten those lessons pretty quickly, and we've gone back to doing things the way we always did. And the thing I would point out is outpatients. So we have this, in our country, I'm sure it's the same here, we have these faintly ridiculous notion of these huge, great sheds stuck on the side of our general hospitals, which are outpatients departments, and 85% of the people don't actually need to be there. So during the pandemic, we got very good at delivering those services remotely. My hospital, where I'm on the board, as Paco mentioned, we're an orthopaedic hospital. We were delivering 90% of outpatients appointments remotely, including physiotherapy. We're back now to less than 10% remotely. It drives me crazy, but we're not unique. Other hospitals are the same. So those developments, that sort of technology is what we're going to need to do, and we need to do it in collaboration. So let's remind us what collaboration actually looks like. I mean, at the end of the day, we all have, whatever our roles, we all have something in common, whether in government, whether in industry, whether we're clinicians. We all have something in common, and our agendas overlap at the point at which people receive appropriate access to high-quality healthcare. So I used to work for a company called Medtronic, and Medtronic was founded by a guy called Earl Backham. And Earl was an electrical engineer, and he used to basically maintain and repair electrical equipment. And Medtronic is medical electronics. And he did that because his wife was a nurse at the Northwestern Hospital in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul, in Minnesota, in the sort of Midwest. They say the Midwest United States. Those of you who know it, it's central North United States, high up on the prairies, borders the Great Lakes. And Earl spotted a gap in the market, so his work was repairing and maintaining equipment in the hospital. Then in 1957, 1957, Halloween 1957, so almost exactly to the day, Minnesota has a climate that is quite unique, is quite extreme, and they experienced some really severe storms, which knocked all the power out across the Twin Cities. Now, cardiac surgery in the 1950s was being pioneered in the Twin Cities. This is very serendipitous, we'd say. And in those days, cardiac surgery was basically surgery on children for congenital heart disease. And the pioneer surgeon, a guy called Palmer Hermansley, realised when he treated children, depending on where he put the sutures on the heart, it would disrupt the electrical flow in the heart. So he had to put them on a pacemaker, and the pacemaker had to be plugged into the wall. In 1957, Halloween, those storms, as I said, knocked out the electricity supply. The generators also failed, and one of the children that had been operating on that, they died as a result. So the next time Palmer Hermansley saw Earl Backham, he said, Earl, you've got to build me a device that generates this level of output, electrical output, but does not depend on mains electricity. Now, Earl's an engineer. He's a great engineer. He said, that is no problem whatsoever. I'll do it for you. And he went back to his office, which was his kitchen table, and he thought, how the heck am I going to do this? And he looked through some journals he had, and these weren't learned journals. These were people who had hobby and interest in electrical engineering. And he remembered something about a new invention, a transistor that had just been patented. And he went to his workshop, which was his garage, and he built the first wearable pacemaker. And a couple of days later, he took it to the hospital, and then he received a phone call. He was invited into the Northwest Hospital, and the picture you can see is a sight that greeted him. And this was a child wearing the thing that he built in his garage a few days earlier. Now, our industry, we're engineers. We iterate devices. Things don't happen quite that quickly anymore. This was before the FDA existed, and there are a few more regulatory hurdles we need to go through. But from that point, electricity now is stock in trade for some of the biggest companies. You'll know Medtronic, still Boston Scientific, other companies. And you can use electricity to stimulate various organs and various nerves in the body, to treat anything from the cardiac arrhythmias here, to heart failure, to incontinence, to Parkinson's disease. That all came about by iteration. Clinicians saying, okay, you built me this device, Earl, now change the electrode array. I can get a better effect. Or build me a device where I can get it to another part of the body. I can do something else. So collaboration is at the heart of what we do as an industry. It always will be. We're engineers, and we engineer solutions for clinical problems. So I just wanted to remind us of that and say why collaboration is so important to what we do. We have, in the UK, we've kind of embraced and recognised this. The reason why it's quite difficult to get into your country now for a Brit is because we made the decision in 2016 to leave the European Union. And the Menace to the Medical Devices Act of 2021 was one of the pieces of legislation that we introduced to enable us to have the legislative power we needed as a sovereign nation to govern. And the Medical Devices Act was about allowing us to regulate devices and make the regulations that were up until then governed by European law. And written into the law is the fact that any regulations we make now as a result of a country have to take account of a number of things. Obviously, patient safety, of course, that's what we're here. That is at the front of what we do every day, and we welcome as an industry strong, robust regulation. We also must need to take account of the availability of devices, and that's a lesson that the Swiss have learned really, really hard. Thousands of devices disappeared overnight from the Swiss market because they made a mess of their regulation. But also, the likelihood of the United Kingdom being seen as a favourable place for our industry. This is very much about health is wealth, and you talked before in your opening remarks about the sustainability of the healthcare system. There's no, for a publicly funded healthcare system like we have and like you have, the best way of maintaining that is to have a strong economy. And so that's why it's written in the law that any regulations we make have to take account of that and make sure that our country is a favourable place to develop, to manufacture and to distribute medical devices. We also have something of an industrial strategy. We used to have a department for industrial strategy that got taken away. It's been replaced by another one. Industrial strategy sounds a bit Soviet, which probably doesn't fit very well with our government. But we do have a number of chosen sectors. So energy is one, telecommunications is one, finance is one, but life science is one of the chosen sectors. And we have a vision that was published in 2021. And again, the language I think is really, really interesting in there, building genuine trust between the NHS and our industry, so we can work together and face those challenges that we face, that you face, have been outlined already, but also create an outstanding business environment for our life sciences sectors, because we recognise how important it is for the health and wealth of our country. Some of the current initiatives that fall out of that, we have a Life Sciences Council, which covers the broader life sciences. This is joint government industry working, which includes our colleagues from the biopharmaceutical sector. It's co-chaired by our Secretary of State for Health and also the CEO of AstraZeneca at the moment, obviously. We have a great heritage in biopharmaceuticals in the UK. Below that sits a number of expert working groups. We have one just for health technology. It's co-chaired by a minister and someone from industry. It's currently a former colleague, actually, of Paco's. But those bodies exist to address challenges of mutual importance for the industry and our country. That's why we have our ministers sat around the table. We've also set out to embark upon we have 15 health innovation networks that cover England. And they're a collaboration between industry, academia and the NHS. And they're designed as a mechanism to accelerate the adoption of innovation at pace and scale. And we're currently undergoing, the NHS in England has an innovation ecosystem programme which is looking at how we best do innovation as part of our service. It's been led by the chief executive of one of our largest hospitals, a guy called Roland Sinker from Cambridge University Hospitals. There are 4 work streams. 2 of them have industry co-chairs. So my boss, the chief exec of the Association of British Health Tech Industries, and one of the other work streams is co-chaired by Richard Talbot, who's the chief executive of the Association of British Pharmaceutical Industries. So why is all this important? This is a survey, you won't be able to see it probably very well from the stage, but this is a survey we did recently with our members, and it compares where would you want to go and do business. Europe has a problem. Europe has a real problem now. Last year, MedTech Europe, the umbrella industry association across Europe, did a survey. 50% of the companies said they are now deprioritising Europe for first regulatory approvals in favour of the United States particularly. People like regulation in the United States. It's predictable, it's certain, and it's linked to being able to place products on the market at the end of it. That's a complete about-face from 10 years ago. 10 years ago, American companies wanted to come to Europe and get their CE mark, go to market here first, and then go to the US. That's turned around. As an association, we have an accelerator in the US. We've taken probably 200 companies to the US in the last 5 years, and we'll do more and more of that if we're not careful. So all those are indicators of what's it like to do business, what's the cost of doing business, how do we compare. Europe's is doing really badly on there. That's the dark column. The sort of pink column, the red column is the UK, the blue is the US. The US is hands down ahead of everything. The second column along is the one thing where we are neck and neck with the UK, is how our companies value or view the role of collaboration between health systems and industry. That is the one thing that is keeping the UK in the game. That's the one thing that is keeping people investing in the UK. And investment means new technologies which help support the sustainability and the efficiency of our health systems, but also delivering fantastic products to the patients we serve. Thanks, Paco.
Thank you, Richard. I cannot leave the opportunity without asking you in front of the audience, so I would like you to explain then. I mean, how did you overcome in the UK the resistance to this public-private cooperation? You know, what kind of trade unions or hospital staff or social population resistance did you find initially? And how have you overcome that to have the private-public cooperation in the UK at the status that you are today?
Yeah, well, I think we had to. If you go back to the early 1990s, the NHS was founded in 1948. It carried on pretty much as it was. It was run largely by clinicians. There was no managers at all in British public services before 1983, actually. The clinicians ran the service, and there was this uneasy balance between the clinicians who ran the service. It was underfunded, but they didn't say anything, and the state let them get on with it. Then we had some reforms in the 1990s, which broke that. We had a Prime Minister called Margaret Thatcher, some of you may remember, who said she was going to reform the NHS. And to create a sort of market-based economy to get hospitals to compete against themselves. Then when the Labour Party came in 1997, they said they'd get rid of the internal market, and they did. They replaced it with a real market, and they brought in the private sector. We had to do it at that time. I think in about 1997, the budget for the NHS was something like £60 billion, but the NHS estate, our hospital buildings, were in disrepair to about the same amount of money. There's no way we were going to be able to deliver modern hospitals without that public-private partnership. So a lot of money was invested from the private sector to build our infrastructure. We've also used, and we still do, we use the private sector, Clara will talk about this, I'm sure, to address capacity issues. And that is kind of valuable sometimes. One of the problems we had in the pandemic is that we rely on large district general hospitals. We haven't got very many small specialist cold elective centres, and our hospital estate is still very old. The hospital where I serve on the board is 200 years old, and parts of a hospital look like they're 200 years old as well. So when you get COVID into those big general hospitals, and nobody tries to run health and care at a scale we do in the UK. Our hospitals are huge by international comparison. It was difficult to get COVID out. So again, one of the lessons we learned is that the private sector can give us that capacity when we need it, so it supports the NHS rather than competes with it. And all hospitals outsource services. So by own hospital, we outsource pathology. Many hospitals outsource pathology. People don't want to run pathology. We actually outsource that to actually another NHS hospital, because in our city we have one of the largest hospitals in the UK. But we also we have companies in to help with our logistics, help us with our with managed service contracts, which I know Clara will come on to talk about, which has tax implications. So there is that, it is needed, the additional capacity was needed, and I think there is that genuine partnership. So back to my slides about why it's in legislation that we have to create a favourable environment in our country for the private sector in the life sciences.
Oh, great. Just to make an example, thank you, Richard, before we go into Clara, just to give you an idea, we are by the time we are talking here, estamos en este momento, hay un concurso en Reino Unido, National Health Service, en Birmingham, sobre esto que estamos hablando, sobre servicios de descontaminación para todos los hospitales de la ciudad de Birmingham. Simplemente un detalle, el concurso se hará operativo al adjudicatario el 1 de abril del 2024 y la longitud del contrato será hasta el 31 de marzo del 2039, con posibilidad de una extensión de 3 años más. Evidentemente, estamos hablando de periodos que nada tienen que ver con lo que aquí estamos manejando. O sea, es imposible poder conseguir acuerdos de colaboración público-privada que requieran inversión importante, inversión potente, si nos movemos en periodos de adjudicación que puedan ser 2 años, 2 más 2, 2 más 3. Evidentemente, tanto en Reino Unido como en Italia, los periodos de contratación son mucho mayores. So, thank you very much, Richard. Let's hear now from the other part of the line. Clara is representing NHS. Clara representa ahora la parte de Richard era la industria. Clara es la administración pública, el National Health Service. So, Clara,
Thank
go ahead.
you. Hi, so I'm Clara Purnell. I've got over 15 years' experience leading and transforming procurement functions, both within private and public healthcare departments. I've called it a snapshot of public sector procurement, and it is indeed a snapshot of public sector procurement. And hopefully you will all come out here with some new knowledge and or questions about how we manage partnerships and collaboration within public sector procurement. Just to give you a very, very high engagement kind of insight into my morals and my objectives and my values, collaboration, partnership, innovation and inspiring the next generation of procurement professionals really sit at the core of what I do, and that isn't for effect for this presentation, that genuinely is how I've operated the last 15 years. So before I start, I'd like to just thank everybody for having me here, and hopefully I provide some useful insight into supplier partnerships. So, the NHS. I'm sure you've all heard of the NHS here. We're one of the largest global healthcare organisations in the global organisations with over 75 years. We're actually in our 76th year of service to the UK population. We have a budget of 150 billion and non-pay spend of 33 billion. So I'm sure you can expect, not only is that a huge, huge task, there's a lot of people involved in ensuring that we adhere to governance, regulations and legislation across the healthcare system is absolutely critical. The NHS Constitution sets out the rights of patients, the public and the staff. So even in the commercial roles, such as mine, why we're here is for the patient, and that's at the forefront of everything we do within healthcare. NHS is responsible, so I said about 150 billion and 133 billion non-pay spend. That makes us one of the largest buying powers globally, and that's significant. So how we manage that partnership with those private suppliers, how we manage those contracts through the life of that duration of the contract, again, is absolutely critical to delivering patient care, patient outcomes, and developing healthcare. So, a little bit about my other role. Paco mentioned I'm the Deputy Chief Officer at the Healthcare Supply Association, which is a mouthful, so we're going to use HCSA, because the NHS, we love an acronym. That's our favourite thing, so watch the space, acronyms coming your way. The HCSA was developed 60 years ago, and it's a charitable organisation that represents procurement and supply chain professionals. And I'm really proud that the last 2 years I've been sat on the board changing perception of procurement and supply chain within healthcare. And it's important we have an organisation that represents a workforce that does face a lot of challenges. So how we seek greater recognition, again, is really, really key, but build more efficient and effective NHS purchasing and supply chain service for the future. And then how do we develop our procurement professionals so that they can take the next generation forward, but also assure our public and our taxpayers that we're delivering the best service we can. And I had to get this in here, But in December 2023, we set up our first national ever women's network and organisation. That's honestly really, really important for me. I'm surprised we haven't had that sooner. And these are sort of things and factors I'd like you to consider about. Not only is it how we partnership and collaborate with our private partners, but also we ensure that we look after our own staff and our colleagues within our organisation. So I'm going to go into Royal Berkshire. So that's the trust I work at, Royal Berkshire NHS Foundation Trust. To give you some context, we have around 164 acute major hospitals within England. Royal Berks, or RBFT, we're one of the largest hospitals in the country, serving a population of around 1 million people, and the main provider of acute and specialist care for Berkshire West. So for those who aren't aware of England, because I've assumed you all know the geographical map of England, if London's here, we're kind of there. We have a turnover of 550 million and a 220 million non-pay spend. And when I talk about non-pay spend, that does cover services, goods and works that help generate and deliver and underpin a lot of the service patient care into the hospital. And one of our mantras is working together to provide outstanding care for the community. So I'm going to give you a very, very high level overview of NHS procurement, legal and regulatory. So as you can imagine, being one of the largest global healthcare organisations, we are duty bound by a number of legislation, governance, guidance, regulations. We've got parties and boards who oversee what we're doing and how we manage that. But in procurement specifically, we currently are managed and governed under the Public Contract Regulations 2015. That has been replaced with a new public procurement bill that is taking effect from January 2024, and that's significant. That enables procurement teams to have more flexibility in supplier selection, but also how we deselect suppliers, as well as manage our suppliers and our contracts. This supplier selection is absolutely crucial at the beginning of each process. So it's called MAT, or Most Advantageous Tender, and the criteria within that is measurable, specific and clear, proportionate, linked to subject matter of the contract, and scope to refine the criteria. And why that MAT is absolutely essential, so it holds us procurement professionals account as well as the hospitals. Without that, you will see that our suppliers, our private partners, that will leave us in a sticky position, which I will come back onto this later. So local procurement and supply chain is underpinned by local policy, strategy, audit, KPIs and SLAs. Contract management is absolutely critical to what we do. All contracts within the NHS over 5 million must have at least 3 KPIs, which will be published and sent to NHSE. So NHS England governs over the overall work we do within NHS. And as a minimum, we need to assess performance of those agreed KPIs every 12 months. I would expect, and I can speak for my team, we hold more regular meetings of our suppliers, especially our critical. I'd say every month, if not 3, and then later into 3 months and 12 months. So, before I go into that, I haven't deliberately selected a glamorous picture of some of my team. But this is, so procurement and supply chain at RBFT. So our focus is to lead and future-proof the way we manage our suppliers and our supply chain. So we talk about digitisation and innovation. We need to ensure that our suppliers and supply chain move forward with that. Our service is led and delivered with continuous quality improvement and getting it right first time. We have a number of what we call driver and watch metrics in the department that hold us to account and how we're managing those suppliers and selecting those suppliers. So factors such as data, we call it data is king in the NHS. That's absolutely crucial in how we determine whether a supply partner is delivering the goods, services or works that we set out to do when we first appointed those. It also holds the trust to account in terms of our non-pay spend. Is it usefully impacting service delivery? Is it helping our patients? Building our relationships and partnerships. So absolutely, building relationships and partnership with suppliers is key, but it starts within the hospital, within your healthcare setting. For me, when I joined RBFT 6 years ago, frankly, that department was terrible, and that's not a reflection of me, it's the team as well. We together said, we need to change the perception of what procurement can do to help the clinical and operational teams within RBFT. You will typically see a bad procurement function as faceless. They're not engaging with their stakeholders, which should be, every time, your operational teams and your clinical teams, as well as members of the public. We do that in RBFT. Supporting our local health economy and community with our supply partners to deliver outstanding patient care is absolutely essential. We are called an anchor institution in RBFT, so we work with our community. So where we've got private suppliers coming in, or supplier partners as I call them, the impact of that on the local health and economy is absolutely astounding. And that's what we set out to do, is to support our patients and our community in collaboration with our partners. And today, I can confidently say that's worked very well. Our integrity is critical as well. And our team works with absolute integrity, tenacity, and strives to deliver the best. It helps that everybody in my team is extremely competitive. We have a league table in the NHS. We were bottom of that league table for a number of years. Within a year, we got to top 50. So, that's kind of the people we're dealing with here at RBFT. But going back into integrity and tenacity, you've got to be able to procure with confidence and feed back to your customers, which is the public and the patients, right? Without those morals and without those values sat behind that, I would probably suggest you look at what you're doing for a living, to be honest. Being honest and transparent is really, really important to identifying the suppliers. Your gut instinct will tell you if you've got the wrong partner.
Clara, may I add something here at this point?
Yes, of course.
I think that will help people understand a little bit what kind of a scenario we have in the UK.
Yeah.
So there are two main key things that are important or relevant to me based on my experience with the UK contracts. One of them is not irrelevant. You have the contracted out services, right, where the VAT is absent.
Yeah.
Right? So, 20% de IVA está exento en los contratos, en una serie de contratos de servicio. O sea, en Reino Unido, lógicamente, se facilita muchísimo la contratación de servicios, son conscientes de la importancia de la industria y, por lo tanto, el IVA está exento. Todo lo contrario de lo que pasa aquí. Si metes a través de un servicio cualquier suministro que va al 10%, pues te pega el salto al 21% y entonces ya estamos matando la gallina antes de que salga del huevo. So that's one important fact for me to. But also, I mentioned before that equally important is the control that you have on the partners.
Yeah.
The qualification that you require the partners to provide, the solvency you require from the partners. And let me just make an example. They do control audits every year to the different partners. We were inspected in one of our main sites back in 2022 on December 31st at 7 p.m., so 5 hours before the year ended. One of our biggest sites in the US was inspected and audited by NHS, okay? So it's a very professional framework, the one that we have in the UK, and there are pros and cons. So if we want the beauties of a healthy private-public cooperation, we also need to understand that it has to provide added value to the healthcare system. Okay?
Absolutely.
Sorry, I wanted to spread those two things because I think it's important for the audience. So 20% VAT absent I think is quite relevant to mention here.
Yeah. We, to add on to that, it's critical you look at, the value add and the lifelong contract and what that's going to deliver over the years. So, when you start selecting suppliers, we want to ensure through robust contract management, KPIs, SLAs, and allow for flexibility in contractual terms. so that you can develop and innovate and transform as you move along in the years, particularly in those longer-term contracts. I'm not going to go over these facts and figures because I'm going to run out of time. But delivering patient care through partnerships and collaboration with supply partners. So there's been a number of examples within Royal Berkshire where we've successfully appointed private suppliers or supply partners to help us deliver patient care. Decontamination, electronic patient records, pharmacy dispensing, patient-provided collaboratives and ophthalmology. We've worked with all of them, with our clinical teams, with our staff, and actually ensured that those patient outcomes are far exceeding than what we'd expected. And again, that's through teams working together collectively and engaging the right people and communicating. Paco, we just talked about the supplier selection and the KPIs and VAT, reviewing and monitoring spend, contracts, performance, and looking at the market external factors is another really, really important way of ensuring that those supply partners deliver the original specification that we'd set out to do. I'm conscious of time. So, risks of poor procurement and partner selection. We don't always get this right. And I think it's important to put your hands up and say something's gone wrong, it's not working. Lessons learned and in the spirit of continuous quality improvement is absolutely essential. So your starting position and your specification and stakeholder engagement is key. Within the NHS public procurement, we're subject to freedom of information, so anybody can ask us about the contracts we have in place and the supply partnerships we have in place. That's why I'm absolutely adamant that you lead with integrity, transparency, and assuring your value for money, not only to your trust and your colleagues and your staff, but to the public and the patient. The patient want assurance they're going to receive the best care possible. And with the work we've done in NHS, I can with confidence say that we have done that. Considerations for the future of healthcare. These are actually personal to me as well. So working together in partnership with our suppliers and organisation within the healthcare market is essential to delivering best-in-class patient care. Healthcare, as we know, is fast-paced, multifaceted, but to continuously improve and innovate and future-proof and evolve, we do need to partner with suppliers. That private-public collaboration is absolutely essential to build and develop healthcare for not only now, but for years to come. And being sustainable in that is absolutely a consideration for all we're here today as well. Breaking down the barriers of misconception in which we operate within will be a benefit to the customer, the patient. And again, that's through communication, transparency, and learning and understanding and educating the importance of that public-private collaboration. And as I said at the beginning of my presentation, patient care is what we're here for. It's at the forefront of what we do for all of our work. Therefore, we must continue to work with existing and new partners to enable us to develop and evolve our healthcare services. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clara. Me gusta esa última expresión. Patient care is at the forefront of everything we do in healthcare, right? Esto es lo importante aquí. Antes de hablamos de privatización, antes de pensar en seguridad de paciente, acceso a la innovación, sostenibilidad del sistema. Bueno, Reino Unido, como dije antes, es mi referente en el tema de la contratación de servicios y nosotros, evidentemente, en el servicio que más conocemos, lo tenemos clarísimo que es el mercado referente en este momento en Europa para intentar caminar en esa dirección. We are running out of time, so el próximo speaker es Trevor García. Dije antes que él ha sido una persona clave en que se materialice la masiva contratación o subcontratación de servicios en el tema de la descontaminación de material médico quirúrgico en el Reino Unido. Y me gustaría, I would like to start with a question for you. Which are the drivers that drove that massive bet on external organizations in terms of subcontracting decontamination services? Trevor?
Okay.
Morning.
Yeah, so the drivers are... Could I have a flicker for the...
You can certainly.
Thank you. Drivers for the changes in decontamination. The main one was in 2003, the Department of Health, which is the governing body for the NHS, decided that there were concerns being raised around the standard of decontamination of medical devices within the organisations within the NHS trusts. So the Department of Health commissioned authorised engineers, so engineers and operational managers, decontamination managers, to go out onto each trust and carry out audits. So at each site there would be an engineer looking at the equipment and the environment, and the operational person looking at what was going on through the process. That was report that everyone was then fed back. We fed back our results. Everything was RAG rated. Everything in the UK is RAG rated, which is red, amber, green. The original money that had been set aside was around £200 million. And the idea was that the money would be given to the green sites to expand their capability, because they'd shown commitment that they appreciated the standard required in decontamination, and they were going to be given money for updating equipment, increasing size, etc. However, when the results came back, there was too many ambers and reds for that to work. So they had to rethink what they were doing, and they actually then gave a lot of money, had to give a significant amount of that money back to the red sites to enable them to bring the standards up to the minimum levels that were required. So that was the main driver for the change in decontamination. And there will be another driver coming along later this year around qualifications and training, which I'll talk about in a minute. So, Institute of Decontamination Sciences, who are we, what are we? So, I'm the National Chair. I've been in post for 1 year. Been a very hectic year. We're recognised in the UK as the biggest professional body for all medical device processing. We were established since 1967. And at that time, it was a group of sterile services department managers who got together and felt that they could share knowledge. It's changed now. We don't look at sterile services, we look at decontamination, and decontamination covers every type of medical device that needs decontamination. So whether it goes through the decontamination unit, or in many of our roles now, we look at all the medical devices on wards and in clinics. So our remit has grown significantly. We help lead the reviews of guidance and best practice in all areas of decontamination. So we have in the UK HTMs, which are hospital technical memorandums for sterile services and endoscopy areas. When I started in 1984, document was about 1 to 2 millimetres tall. The documents now for each of those sections is probably about, trying to convert it into centimetres, 15 centimetres. So a lot more reading, but a lot more information. It's been recognised that decontamination is not just a process, it's a science. And if we don't understand the science, then we're going to do it wrong. And the patient safety, as Clara and everybody says, patient safety is the most important thing. We also develop and provide educational and training programs. So we have our own programs for SSD, and we're about to launch one for endoscopy, which will be an online training course. And we're also looking at promoting research and development and innovation, and we're not good at that, so it's something that I'm particularly driving for. And the type of members we have are SSD managers, decontamination managers, endoscopy leads, infection prevention and control leads, engineers and microbiologists. And we have very clear structures within our guidance that say how the decontamination manager may have a line manager, which is a reporting manager, but a professional reporting line through to microbiologists, infection prevention control. So if there is something around the process or around the risks, we don't go to our managerial manager, we go to our professional line reporters, so to the microbiologists, to the infection prevention and control. And that's laid down in our guidance. A brief overview of the HAIs in the UK. We are good at collecting some data in the UK. We're really good at collecting patient data. So, and we have to report it on a regular basis. So 70% of HAIs are preventable and 3.5% of patients who acquire an HAI are reported to die from their infection. The main causes for the infections, the one that is in red that's the most important from my point of view is a surgical site infection. We know that they're in most cases avoidable, and trying to identify how they happen and at what stage of the patient's pathway it happened is always very hard. Infection Prevention Control do a root cause analysis of each case and report it back. But the one thing they never looked at in many trusts is they never looked at the decontamination process. And that's the one thing I've started to ask them to include because it's an important factor. And it's one we can evidence that we've done it right. So it's quite easy because we have to track everything through a system. Clock's going down very quickly already. So it is a decontamination site is an essential service. We really, if we don't do our role, then there's a risk of increasing infection to the patient from surgical site infections. Within the role, and again this is within our guidance within the UK, we are a member of the Control of Infection Committee. We have to sit on that. We are responsible for, most now managers are responsible for, as I said, the SSD, the endoscopy, road processing, everything. So we have a much larger remit than what we did when I started in 1984. And all of our departments now are having to be accredited to ISO 13485, which is a quality management system for processing medical devices. Initially, it was for units supplying third-party organisations, but the majority of, or all of the departments, apart from some private hospitals, have gone down the route of getting accredited. And now the endoscopy units are being accredited as well. So it's saying that it's a way of demonstrating that we do what we say we're doing. Briefly went through the driver for change, so won't go through that. So the standards, so we have hospital technical memorandums, as I said, for 01, 06 for endoscopy. We also work alongside those to ISO standards for sterilisation, washer disinfectors, etc. And we were required, all of our departments were required since 1998 to meet ISO 13485. So 1998 is a long time ago, so we've now got 25 years of working to a quality standard. So it is embedded in our DNA. To ensure that we do meet the standards, then we have notified bodies attending site. They're appointed by the Medicines Healthcare Regulatory Authority, the MHRA, which is the UK's regulatory authority. And they audit all sites. And they can come, they do annual audits or 6-month audits, but they also do a unannounced audit, that's the word. So they turn up, it can be, my sound's going. They can turn up in the middle of the night. If you're a 24-hour/7 service, they just turn up and you're expected to cope and show them what you do. So the standard of the department has to be the same day, night, weekend, it doesn't matter. Looking at things regarding staff, when work is transferred, all of our staff are employed under Agenda for Change terms, which is an NHS standard for employment, for describing exactly how people get paid, what they get paid, and the rates they get paid for each role. And if any services are contracted out, that has to be the minimum that the third-party contractors pay. They can pay better, but they have to meet the minimum. and also all national contracts, etc., as Clara mentioned, we all have KPIs in them, and they're really important. So what are the risks and challenges? So one of the issues we had with the decontamination, I think was one of the biggest, in some ways, one of the biggest move to a private supplier. A lot of the departments were in a situation in 2003 where they hadn't met the requirements, so they started looking at contracting out. But some of the decisions were taking 2 to 3 years, and in that time, the department standard, the equipment was getting older, the equipment was failing more regularly, the environment was deteriorating. So it did it did cause some problems. And one of the things we were concerned about as well, from our point of view, was to ensure there was sufficient private providers to ensure there was a choice to go to, and to ensure that it wasn't just 1 or 2 providers, so that we could get a cost-effective service, but with appropriate experience. The problem with that was they had a 9 at the beginning, but most of them didn't have experience. So who's going to take the risk of going to a provider who doesn't have experience? So choice is great, and it's right we should have choice, but the experience, and it is such an essential service that you can't afford for the private provider to be learning while delivering the service. It doesn't work. They need to be up and running. One of the Department of Health MPs came to our conference, and they were presenting, saying a laundry could shut down a hospital within about 6 hours if they stopped processing all the sheets. And we went, well, we can shut it down in 2 hours. You know, it's not top trumps, but we could, if they don't process the surgical instruments, that hospital stops acting as a trauma unit more or less immediately. So it's that vital. So we can't afford to give the contract to the wrong person. The other risk as well is around that the hospitals are very bad at collecting data around what we do. So that gave a lot of problems at the time. That has improved because now all departments have tracking systems, so electronic tracking systems, so all data is collected. From an operational point of view, the quality of service, we can't risk ever having cancelled operations. We don't want to have damaged devices. It happens on both, whether it's a private provider or an NHS provider, it happens. I'm just really concerned time. Workforce, so one of the biggest changes was 2015. It was recognised by the scientific chief officers for England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland that all decontamination staff would be recognised as healthcare scientists. So we were no longer facilities, we were no longer in with estate staff, we weren't with housekeepers, we were in with the scientists, with the pathologists, etc. And that had a significant change. We now have a proper career pathway for our decontamination staff through an apprenticeship programme in England. There's a proposal that registers, and so all decontamination personnel at a certain level will be on a register, which will be managed by Academy for Healthcare Science. And for lower level people, they will be on a directory. Basically, it's a license to practice. If you're not on it, you will not be working. And decontamination staff were recognised as a profession in its own right. We are our own people. With the education and training, we're finding it is helping with retaining staff. The retention is improving, and the competency of staff is improving, and we are educating our staff from the bottom up, as much in fact, more from there than we are from the top down at the moment, because if the ones doing the work make the errors, they are the ones that have the immediate effect. So the current situation where we are, So we've been working with the private side since about 2003 onwards. There's over 20 private decontamination units in England and Scotland. And each of those private decontamination units will supply multiple hospitals. So they could be supplying up to about 50 different hospitals. All private contractors and providers have to meet exactly the same standard as NHS. So there's no difference. They're all audited exactly the same. And I think if we do things right within decontamination, and this is everybody, we have a modern processing effective equipment, we have proper controlled rooms, we have trained and qualified staff, and we have informatics and data to manage the evidence process. And last of all, the benefits that the private sector can bring to us and have brought to us, not can, they have. They've invested in new builds. The NHS has a finite amount of money. You know, Clara wants it all, I want it all, everybody wants it all. And we can't do it, so we do need help. We needed help with the capital. It did manage to reduce significantly the number of non-compliant units. The private sector is really good at collecting, coming up with good ideas, challenging processes, looking at it, but they don't just challenge for the sake of it. It's always challenging within our field, within existing practice with scientific evidence. So look at what we're doing and may look at it and come up with improvements. And there's certainly some in the UK that I see being used in the private sector units, which are, we'd love to adopt into the NHS, but financially can't afford at the moment.
Richard?
Yeah. So I've finished. We are extending out into endoscopy as well. So that's it. Okay.
Gil?
Okay.
I alerted you right before you were finishing. So we have just a few minutes left, Giorgio, for you. Give us, please, an overview of what is happening in Italy in terms of public-private cooperation.
Okay.
And I would take a couple of final minutes to make a summary of everything we discussed over the roundtable.
Thank you guys for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here to try to expose to you which is the concrete scenario that we are driving in Italy from 25 years until now. I have to say to you, sorry for my English, because my Italian is worse than my English, so it's better that I'm speaking English. Overview. In Italy, we have 1,000 hospitals. 60% of hospitals are public, 40% of hospitals are private. And we have in outsourcing service about 150 hospitals. And at the moment, the trend is move all this reprocessing activity to an external provider. How many providers there are in Italy? We are 7, 8 providers that drive this kind of service. 3 are laundry. They move this sector from a laundry perspective to a sterilization perspective. And there are 3 providers. One is Steris, that is only deputy only to sterilization service. And there are other companies that are looking for step into this market because they see that there is a lot of hospitals that they have a lot of problem, and they move this kind of activity in outsourcer for a political problem that we have in Italy in terms of healthcare. The map shows that we have the facility that we have in Italy. It means that we have, there is not the south, but we have also one in Bari. So it means that the message is every hospital from the north to the south want to move to this trend. And in terms of how many customers we drive at the moment, in private sector, we have 13 customers. It means that not means that we have 13 CSD. Sometimes we have from one CSD that is internal in the hospital. On the contrary, compared with the UK market, our market is hospital want that we manage the facility inside of the hospital. We have a 13 hospital, and we deliver the service to outside small department they ask to be supplied. 13 are private hospital, and 3 are public sector. 3 public sector, it means that we have 6 facility around 6 hospitals. And we are developing, like in UK, the new El Dorado, that is the endo service that is developing, where the culture of this kind of standard is very poor and is under building for all the market. Globally, we provide 30 customers around all Italy. Public and private sector, same needs, a different strategy. In a short way, what happened? What it means that every hospital have the same needs, but every hospital want to follow different strategy. For example, for the reprocessing activity, I'm moving this way because I can read what I'm writing there. What is the focus? It's a reprocessing activity, because our service can be built in different steps and with different needs. Reprocessing service need to have a logistics, internal or external service that is made by ourselves, to have one responsibility under the same provider. There is a big problem. Restructuring CSD, old equipment, or not adequate layout of CSD. Sometimes there is no competence in the hospital, and the hospital want a partner that can follow this kind of restructuring based on the service, not based on only to replacement of all the equipment. Surgical instruments. This is a big hole, this big problem in Italy. Every hospital don't have a surgical instruments. The turnaround time is 4 hours in Italy. How is in UK? So you know that every time no one knows how many instruments we have, why I have to maintain these instruments instead of the other instruments, and why I have to buy instruments. You know, some doctor want to buy one brand, some other doctor want to buy another brand, and there is no a collective under control this kind of cost for the hospital. So the model is why the service providers that see every day all the instruments don't have under control the tracking system of the surgical instruments, and in which way we are going to compose the kit. Who decide to compose the kit in the hospital? The doctor. Which is the logic? We don't know. No one knew which is the logic. Service provider, thanks to the expertise that is made around all the hospital, can promoting a kit already standardized to have an overview and a control about what is the budget to spend in next year in terms of replacement and number of kit, and how many kit I need to do this my planning. If you plan your surgical operation based on the instruments, you are full, because you are planning the surgical operation not because you have only 2 kits and you have to put during the day 2 surgical operation, one starting on the morning and one at the end of the day, because during the time you have to reprocessing. It's not sure for the patients, it's not sure for the business, it's not sure for nothing. And in which way we can buy the instruments? With renting. So all these kind of needs can be under a public, is usable for public and private sector, but we can build the service for every single exeter, every single private sector. For how long? Usually, if you have a contract only for reprocessing, is 3+2, where there is no capex investment in Italy. With the internal logistic as well, with a truck, your renting is 3+2. Restructuring CSD, a contract with the restructuring usually is long, 5+5, between 5 and 8 years, and maintenance surgical instrument is the same level. It means that when there is a capital investment, the minimum deadline to be supportive the investment is minimum 5 years, or usually now is moving for 10 years. When there is public partnership, we are moving to 10 years. Outsourcing in Italy, born 25 years ago, more or less. The first one was Tuscany tender under public sector. For 25 years, the tender was focused only restructuring the CSD without any logic in terms of layout on the machine that is they have a big choice. What drive public sector? the standard of processing has been increasing. What drive to move to outsource? Because they understood that the level of processing was very poor and internally, and they moved to expertise, to external expertise. And the problem in Italy that now they stop to employ this nursery for this kind of activity. So public sector need to have outsourcing service to provide some typical some service that is not a core business. Private sector, what drive the choice to outsourcing? Private sector want to focus the activity on the core business. Sterilization is not a core business for them. Reprocessing is not a reprocessing, so they want to be on the productivity. And they don't. And it is not easy to find expertise in Italy about sterilization service. So this is why outsourcing is moving to the private sector is moving to outsourcing. I already told you about how many, and a lot of time customers need a proactive consultancy by the provider because they don't have internal expertise to collect all the points that I showed before. So we become, first of all, the consultant to drive the decision. That is a strategic decision for the hospital, public and private. And then we try to be a real partner to develop this kind of activity. The problem is how select the right partner. Oh, sorry. Right partner is the customer need to understand what is the right need: reprocessing, renovation, maintenance instrument, or renting instrument. Need to qualify the partner. In Italy, for example, for the tender is 70% quality at 30% price. Private tender is a discussion phase by phase to understand which is the best solution. The quality evaluation in the public tender has been evaluated: process evaluation, capital equipment, maintenance service, traceability system, and certification. And price evaluation, more important. Some contract has fixed price. Some contract has a price per surgical operation or reprocessing. Some contract is based on the standard STU, standard unit. It means that sometimes hospitals want to move to surgical operation because of fixed data, and they have not any surprise if they move to standard unit, because also in that case the data that hospital has is very poor, so they have to maintain the cost of the price. That's all for me.
Thank you, Giorgio. Estamos fuera de tiempo. We are running out of time. We are jumping just right after into the coffee break. First of all, before I forget, we are not having time for questions, which unfortunately wasn't my previous desire. So if there is any question out of the audience that we could respond later on, it is my commitment up front that we will be channeling them through the organization to any of you that might be interested in something. But, voy a tomar un par de minutos para hacer un sumario, un poco empezando con el mensaje que di al principio. La industria somos parte del ecosistema sanitario. Lo somos. Lo somos. Lo sabemos. Sabemos lo que podemos aportar. Sabemos lo que podemos hacer. Yo he querido traer el ejemplo de este servicio en dos países que no nos son muy lejanos, Reino Unido e Italia, porque ellos ya están haciendo ampliamente pasos agigantados hacia la subcontratación de servicios y hacia la colaboración con la industria y en marcos de colaboración público-privada. Han sabido manejar internamente la palabra maldita, la privatización, han sabido encontrar maneras de avanzar. Tienen sus problemas, claro que los tienen, por supuesto que los tienen, y tienen que explicar muchas veces las cosas que hacen, ¿no? Pero están sabiendo encontrar el camino, como digo. Nosotros somos un player importante en ambos países. Para los que han llegado tarde, nosotros reprocesamos el equivalente a todas las necesidades de reprocesamiento que tiene la sanidad pública española en el conjunto de UK e Italia, y no somos los únicos proveedores. es muy probable que el 75-80% de ese servicio ya esté subcontratado y estamos hablando de un servicio crítico, no estamos hablando de un servicio más. Reprocesar instrumental quirúrgico, reprocesar endoscopia, manejar todo el control de infecciones de una institución sanitaria o de varias instituciones sanitarias dentro de un área geográfica es un tema mayor, es un servicio importante. Reclamamos contratos dignos, no 2+2. Nosotros estamos trabajando ahora en el contrato de reprocesamiento de todos los hospitales de Birmingham y estamos hablando de un periodo de contratación que empieza el 1 de abril del 24 y termina en el 2039. Lógicamente así, se puede hacer una inversión, se pueden cambiar cosas, se pueden mejorar cosas. ¿Qué cambios se pueden hacer en 2 años en un contrato donde hay CAPEX, como decía Giorgio, o una inversión mayor? Imposible. Nos parece muy bien que se mire con lupa la cualificación. Queremos cualificación. Da la sensación de que muchas veces se puede presentar cualquiera a hacer cualquier cosa. Y esto no nos beneficia como mercado. Si no hay una buena percepción de la colaboración público-privada, si no mostramos claramente con KPIs que hay una aportación, un valor añadido al modelo sanitario, pues nos estamos tirando piedras contra nuestro propio tejado. Penalizaciones. Estamos expuestos a importantes penalizaciones. Cuando las merecemos, tiene que haberlas. Yo creo que en España no se penaliza. Y no voy a ser yo aquí el que invente esta historia, pero es que es verdad. Es decir, tenemos que, si queremos jugar, tenemos que aceptar las reglas de juego, tanto a favor como en contra. Ese es el modelo, es el momento de grandes soluciones, de grandes decisiones. Habrá que ver desde todos los frentes cómo podemos cambiar esto, porque da la sensación de que estamos estancados en la etapa 3 y más bien que avanzar, parece que a veces tengamos incluso que retroceder. No podemos seguir demonizando la colaboración público-privada porque es innegociable, es necesaria. Yo incluso llevo 25 años trabajando en EMEA, en el resto de Europa, y estoy viendo países que inicialmente ni se planteaban la colaboración público-privada, cómo están dando pasos importantes hacia adelante. Los Emiratos Árabes, país que tiene dinero por castigo, Turquía. Todos están avanzando y a mí me preocupa muchísimo como español, como representante hoy del Círculo, de que en este país no estemos sabiendo articular un sendero interesante que al final redunde en una mejor asistencia sanitaria, en una mejor optimización de costes y, en definitiva, en lo que más nos interesa en el Círculo, que era lo que decía Ángel Puente, en la sostenibilidad del sistema. Con esto, espero que haya sido la mesa de interés. Me he quedado con la gana de poder escuchar preguntas y, por favor, que la organización tome nota si alguien las tiene para que podamos responderles más tarde. Y Ángel, no sé si quieres decir tú algo antes del break. Pues entonces, si os parece, dando las gracias de nuevo a todos por vuestra atención. Muchas gracias a los ponentes, gracias por estar aquí y contarnos lo que está pasando en vuestros diferentes países. Pasamos a tomar un café y esperar que los compañeros de Rivera nos cuenten en la siguiente mesa, que seguro será muy interesante, el tema que ellos van a tratar. Buenos días.